On the morning of December 29, 1890, a domestic massacre of several hundred Lakota Indians was performed by soldiers of the United States Army at the Wounded Knee Creek. At the age of 16, Booker Dewitt, a member of the 7th Cavalry Regiment, was given the nickname the White Injun due to his gruesome actions against the Native Americans. A year later, Booker attended a baptism in an attempt to ease his horrific memories and wash away his sins from the Battle of Wounded Knee. In one timeline, Booker rejects the baptism at the last moment, thinking that his sins could not be washed away by a dunk in the river, while in another timeline, he accepts the baptism and is born again, taking on the name Zachary Hale Comstock. After the baptism, Comstock became a farmer and small-time preacher. At one point, he claimed that he had been visited by an archangel, Columbia, who had showed him a vision of a floating city in the sky, and that it was his duty to build and uphold Christian and American values within the city. In the alternate timeline, Booker had gotten himself a job at a detective agency and had met a woman, Annabelle Watson. In the Comstock timeline, Zachary had met with the US Congress with his idea to build the city, which they agreed to fund, believing it could be a showcase of American exceptionalism. They decided to name the city Columbia. Later in 1893, Zachary met Rosalind Lutece, a respected quantum physicist, who was able to indefinitely suspend an atom mid-air. She dubbed it the Lutece field. The two then worked together using the Lutece field to create Columbia, a floating city in the sky. During this time in Booker's timeline, he had become a father, although his wife Annabelle had died in childbirth. He called his daughter Anna in honour of her mother. The death of his wife sent him into a depression, which turned him to alcohol and gambling, far into debt. Upon further experimentation with the Lutece field, Rosalind discovered that the quantum atom that she had been observing was also being observed by someone from another dimension. She learned that this person happened to be a male version of herself, named Robert. They form a relationship and communicate by Morse code by turning on and off the Lutece field. Using her research, she creates the trans-dimensional machine, a machine able to open portals, which she called tears, across dimensions, time and space. With the creation of the machine, Comstock began to use it to enhance his status from preacher to prophet by using tears to look ahead in time at events. Due to his repeated exposure to the machine, Comstock ages rapidly while his genetic traits dissipate, rendering him sterile. Looking into a future tear, he discovers that without an heir, Columbia will fall. Due to his inability to conceive with his wife, Lady Annabelle Comstock, Rosalind proposes that they could simply take a child of his from another dimension, as it would technically still be his child. Comstock agrees, and with the assistance of Rosalind's male counterpart, Robert, they discover that in Robert's universe, Comstock is still named Booker and has a daughter. They see that Booker is in a deep depression with a huge gambling debt. Taking advantage of Booker's situation, Comstock sends Robert to Booker with the offer to clear his gambling debt in exchange for his daughter, Anna. Booker agrees and hands over Anna to Robert. Immediately regretting his decision, he catches up with Robert as Anna is being passed through a tear into Columbia. Booker unsuccessfully attempts to take Anna from Comstock as the tear closes, severing part of her finger. After losing his daughter, Booker falls into a deeper depression, later carving his daughter's initials AD into his hand. To explain the sudden appearance of his new daughter, Comstock tells Columbia that Lady Comstock had been pregnant for only 7 days, giving birth to a miracle child, a story elevating his status as prophet. He renames her Elizabeth Comstock and refers to her as his seed that will one day take the throne of Columbia. Unaware of where Elizabeth actually came from, Lady Comstock abides by her husband's claims. Upon viewing another tear, he sees that Elizabeth is destined to destroy the surface world when she becomes the ruler. A year later, Columbia starts a global tour of major cities. Rosalind, Robert and Comstock continue to improve and build the city for years as it travels the globe. As Elizabeth grows older, they discover that she has the ability to open windows to other worlds, much like the trans-dimensional machine. They theorize that Elizabeth is able to do this as her body exists across 2 dimensions, due to her finger being severed at such a young age during her passing over. After 2 years of compliance, Lady Comstock becomes suspicious of Elizabeth's origins and accuses Rosalind of being her mother. Rosalind denies the claim and explains where Elizabeth actually came from, which Lady Comstock has trouble believing. Confused and angered, she threatens to tell Columbia where Elizabeth came from. To stop his secret from coming out, Comstock has her murdered and blames her servant, Daisy Fitzroy. Due to Elizabeth's power and the transdimensional machine, tears begin to appear all around the city. Jeremiah Fink, an inventor, realizes that profits could be made by stealing advanced technology from alternate universes inside the tears. He begins working with a scientist from another universe, Dr. Suchong. In Suchong's universe, a man had created a city under the ocean. Around the city, they had found a chemical substance that had the ability to rewrite genetic material, allowing the user to change themselves. The people of this city had called it Adam. Fink ordered underwater expeditions to where the city would be in his universe, and collected Adam. From this, he created vigors, domestic aid tonics, that gave the user extraordinary abilities after consumption, such as lighting a fire and lifting heavy loads. These vigors sell extremely well, and he amasses an empire in his large district of Columbia, Finkton. After the false accusation of murdering Lady Comstock, Daisy takes refuge in Finkton, and inspires the formation of the Vox Populi, a protest group against the founders of Columbia, and demands rights for people of colour, the foreign-born, and labourers, as Fink had begun using his workers like cattle. While looking into a tear, Comstock sees that Booker Dewitt will one day somehow enter Columbia and come for Elizabeth. He also notices that he has the initials AD carved on his hand. Fearful of his heir being lost to his alternate self, he creates a prophecy for the city that a false shepherd will one day come for Elizabeth to lead her astray from her destiny in becoming Columbia's leader and destroying the Sodom below, using AD as the signifier of the false shepherd. Comstock imprisons Elizabeth in a tower on Monuments Island, both to protect her from the Vox Populi, who have declared that they wanted to take down the founders of Columbia, and to protect her from the false shepherd. To add an extra level of defense for Elizabeth, Fink tries to create a psychologically indoctrinated human and machine hybrid based on designs from Dr. Suchong's universe, his issue being that he couldn't get the creature to bond with Elizabeth. Frustrated, Fink abandons it in an old laboratory. Still alive, the songbird escapes the laboratory, accidentally crashing into Elizabeth's tower, where she repairs its breather, saving its life. This creates the successful pair bond that Fink had originally wanted. Now Songbird would protect her fiercely. By 1900, the Luteces had begun measuring Elizabeth's power levels. The Vox Populi, founded as non-violent, had begun stealing Fink's new guns and selling them to the black market to fund their revolution. During work on a new fire-based vigor, a fire began to spread, and so to avoid it from spreading into the city, the area was detached and dropped from the city, killing numerous workers, angering the Vox Populi more. While on its tour of the world, Columbia became involved in an international incident, the Boxer Rebellion, an anti-imperialist, anti-foreign, and anti-Christian uprising. Columbia openly fired upon Chinese citizens in Beijing, revealing to the world that the flying city was heavily armed. On July 6, 1902, the United States government formally disavowed Columbia's involvement in the Boxer Rebellion and recalled the city. Outraged, Comstock declared Columbia's secession from the United States, and the city vanishes into the clouds. This date became a citywide holiday, celebrating Columbia's independence. With its independence, Columbia thrived. By 1906, the war between the Colombian police and the Vox Populi had escalated, with Daisy revealing herself as the leader. Rosalind and Robert continued their research and observation of Elizabeth. As she grew older, she found interest in reading, learning the skill of lockpicking, singing and painting, living a content life with Songbird. Elizabeth began using her special abilities more as they grew in power, and was able to view other worlds, specifically taking an interest in the city of Paris. In time, Elizabeth came to resent her captivity and Songbird yearning for freedom. Her first menstruation gave her an increase in power, which led the Luteces to create the Siphon, a device which leached Elizabeth's quantum energy, preventing her from using her powers to their full potential, while giving them the ability to harness it. In 1909, Daisy Fitzroy is captured by the police, and before her scheduled lobotomy, she broke free, the instant turning her non-violent protest group into a brutal militant force against the city. Rosalind and Robert observe a tear which reveals the truth about Comstock's prophecy. Elizabeth would abide by her father's beliefs and become the city's ruler, after which she would lead Columbia to wage war with the world below. The twins did not want to see this happen, so they sought to change it. Robert proposed that they send Elizabeth back into his reality with her original father. Comstock becomes aware of their plan and has Fink tamper with their Lutece device. When the Lutecers attempt to use the sabotage machine, it malfunctions. While it does not kill them, it spreads their atoms across all realities, making them omnipotent. With their newfound knowledge and abilities, the Lutecers plan to bring Elizabeth's original father, Booker, to Rosalind's reality where Columbia is. The Lutece twins visit Booker Dewitt in his office and convince him to assist them in getting his daughter back. They try this 122 times across multiple timelines. In each one, Booker fails and dies. On the 123rd attempt, Booker once again enters the tear to Columbia's universe. When entering another reality, a person's former traits and memories collide with those from the new one. The brain hemorrhages, and false memories are created to compensate for the contradictions. Booker's mind confuses the previous taking of his daughter with a new memory where he must retrieve a girl from the city of Columbia. The Lutecers use this confusion to their advantage and demand that he bring Elizabeth back as a way to erase his debt, forgetting that he is actually going to rescue his daughter. He wakes up in a rowboat near a lighthouse on an island off the coast of Maine on July 6, 1912. After being rowed there by the twins, he enters the lighthouse and is transported into the sky by a shuttle rocket into the city of Columbia. Booker arrives in Columbia's Welcome Center, a church dedicated to the founders and Father Comstock. He is then forcibly baptized in order to enter the city. He discovers that he has entered Columbia on the 10th anniversary of the city's secession from the United States and makes his way to Monument Island, where he believes Elizabeth is. The Lutecers contact him, telling him not to pick number 77 at the city's raffle, as it will bring attention to himself. Arriving at the raffle park, he draws a baseball numbered 77 at the raffle and wins. The raffle's host, Jeremiah Fink, notices the AD carved on his hand and alerts the Columbian police to attack, as he recognizes Booker as the false prophet, foretold by Father Comstock. Booker escapes and makes his way to Monument Island, entering it. He comes across various observational videos, photographs, vitals and charts about Elizabeth, realizing that this girl has been observed her whole life, unaware that she is his daughter. He accidentally falls through the ceiling into Elizabeth's library. While initially scared and defensive, she is relieved by the presence of another person and expresses her desire to leave. Elizabeth becomes fearful as a whistling signal blows, and the songbird arrives at the tower. She and Booker escape from Monument Island, barely evading Songbird, who destroys most of the building. They plan to use a Zeppelin, the First Lady, that will take them out of Columbia. Booker promises Elizabeth that he will take her to Paris, although he actually intends to take her to New York to clear the debt he believes he has. To gain access to the Zeppelin, they realise that they have to get the shock jockey Vigor, which is located in the Hall of Heroes, a museum dedicated to Columbia and Comstock's history. Booker discovers that Cornelius Slate, an old comrade from the Wounded Knee Massacre, has joined the Vox Populi and taken refuge inside there. Fighting through Slate's men, Booker and Elizabeth find an exhibit that covers the death of Lady Comstock, and to her horror, Elizabeth discovers that she is the daughter of Comstock, and that he intends to make her follow in his footsteps, becoming Columbia's leader. Booker finally neutralizes Slate to his request, and recovers the bottle of shock jockey needed to power the gondola to the First Lady. As they leave on the Zeppelin, Elizabeth notices that Booker is steering towards New York instead of Paris. She questions this, and Booker reveals his true intentions, that he needs to bring her to New York to a man who can clear his debt. Elizabeth fakely breaks down in tears. As Booker comforts her, she knocks him out with a wrench. Booker awakens to find Elizabeth gone and the First Lady taken over by the Vox Populi and their leader, Daisy Fitzroy. In order to reclaim the First Lady, Daisy tells him that he must first assist the Vox Populi by finding a gunsmith, Chen Lin, to resupply weapons for the Vox Populi's cause. Booker finds Elizabeth and pursues her, but is attacked and thrown off the city by a handyman. He is saved by a zeppelin summoned by Elizabeth, who decides to help Booker despite not trusting him, knowing he is her only means of reaching Paris. Booker and Elizabeth learn from Chen Lin's wife that he was taken by the Founders for interrogation. Later finding Chen Lin dead from extreme torture, the Lutece twins reveal a tear to a universe in which Chen Lin remains alive and able to help their cause, prompting Elizabeth to bring them into a reality where Chen Lin was never killed. Upon entering this reality, they discover an automatic difference. Although Chen is alive, his tools for making the guns have been confiscated and stashed in a nearby police station. Arriving there, they find that there are too many tools for them to carry all at once. Coincidentally, a tear opens nearby where the tools aren't at the police station. Elizabeth once again brings her and Booker to a new reality of Columbia, where the tools are gone and back at Chen Lin's shop. In this reality, they find that Elizabeth had been taken away from her tower before Booker could reach her, therefore he had reunited with Cornelius Slate alone, and the two had died burning down the Hall of Heroes, becoming martyrs for the Vox Populi. Now reinforced by the gunsmith's weapons, the Vox begin a massive, violent uprising across Columbia, massacring soldiers and supporters of the Founders. As Booker and Elizabeth head to reclaim the First Lady, Daisy is perturbed to see him alive, labelling him either an imposter or a ghost, sending members of the Vox Populi after him. The Luteces meet with Daisy and explain that it's crucial for Elizabeth to kill her as it will lead to Comstock's death. All Daisy has to do is threaten Fink's son and make it look believable. Daisy accepts this as she believes that her death will be good for her cause. Booker and Elizabeth soon catch up to Daisy. After shooting and killing Fink, Daisy holds a gun to the head of Fink's son. Booker distracts Daisy as Elizabeth comes from behind her, plunging a large pair of scissors into her spine, killing her. This heavily traumatizes Elizabeth, who retreats to the First Lady. Booker takes the First Lady's controls, but before he and Elizabeth can leave Columbia, the Songbird reappears and they crash-land the ship. The two crash-land in Emporia, where the Lutece twins inform them that the only way to leave is to control Songbird. They begin to unravel a conspiracy behind the founding of the city through tears around Emporia. They learn about the Luteces, Lady Comstock's murder, and that Elizabeth is actually the adoptive daughter of Comstock. Arriving at Comstock House, Songbird appears and takes Elizabeth. Booker chases after them, only to find himself suddenly in a snow-covered Columbia. He then enters Comstock House after hearing Elizabeth's cries for help. Travelling through the house, he finds her and realises that he has been brought forward 72 years. Here, Elizabeth has upheld her father's prophecy to use Columbia to destroy New York City. The old Elizabeth explains that it was her loss of hope that broke her, and now regrets what she has become. She gives Booker instructions on how to control the Songbird and sends him back to 1912 to rescue her younger self. Returning to Comstock House, Booker enters an operating room where he finds Comstock and his doctors torturing Elizabeth. He deactivates the siphon that is reducing her powers, and she opens a tear to a field being ravaged by a devastating tornado, killing the doctors. They fight their way through Comstock's forces and board his Zeppelin, Hand of the Prophet, finding him in his cabin. Finally face to face with Comstock, he attempts to regain Elizabeth's trust by demanding that Booker tell her the truth about her lost finger. As Booker doesn't remember, in a fit of rage he smashes Comstock's head against a baptismal font multiple times before submerging his face in the water, drowning him. To get access to Elizabeth's full abilities, they plan to destroy the large siphon on Monument Island. At this point, the Vox Populi have unleashed an all-out assault on the Zeppelin. Tearing a whistler from inside a statue, Elizabeth plays the musical notes C, A, G, E, bringing Songbird under her control, defending the Zeppelin from the Vox forces. With the Vox Populi army eradicated, Elizabeth hands the whistler to Booker, who uses it to command Songbird to destroy what remains of Monument Island's statue, and with it, the siphon inside. The massive energy feedback that results from the tower's destruction disables the whistler. thus making Booker lose control of the bird. Just as Songbird is charging at Booker, Elizabeth now uses her full abilities to open a tear, transporting the three of them to Rapture, a city in the future, built under the ocean. Inside of the underwater city's welcome center, Elizabeth and Booker watch as Songbird is crushed under the extreme pressure of the ocean. Elizabeth comforts him as he sinks to the seafloor below. Emerging on the surface using a bathysphere, Elizabeth is now able to see all realities. She reveals to Booker that Columbia and Rapture are connected by key elements. There's always a lighthouse, there's always a man, there's always a city. She leads Booker to a realm between realities, the Sea of Doors, each realm displayed as one of many lighthouses. During the traversing of realities, Elizabeth reveals the truth of Booker's memory of events being flawed, that he had never agreed to retrieve her from Columbia in exchange for eliminating his debt, and that rather, Booker gave his infant daughter Anna to Robert Lutece for that same purpose. Booker then realizes that Elizabeth is Anna. Since Comstock is no more, Booker believes that he and Elizabeth can go on with their lives, but this isn't the case as Comstock lives in other realities. The one way to be rid of Comstock permanently is to go to the point where he first came to be. Elizabeth takes them to one final location, the riverside of Booker's baptism. Confused, Elizabeth explains that he and Comstock are in fact the same person from different realities, similar to Robert and Rosalind. Learning this, Booker allows all the Elizabeths to drown him before he can accept or reject the baptism, preventing his choice from being made, thus stopping Comstock from ever existing. With the elimination of Comstock across all timelines, Columbia's existence is erased, and all of the events that had occurred over the past 20 years vanish along with it. One by one, the alternate versions of Elizabeth begin to disappear until only the original remains, thus ending the cycle. 7 years after the fall and erasure of the floating city of Columbia, in 1919, in an alternate reality, a young boy by the name of Andrei Ryanovsky fled the Russian Empire to start a new life in America, later changing his name to Andrew Ryan. By 1930, his experiences in the workers' paradise had made him despise the ideals of socialism and collectivism, as he believed that those who benefited undeservedly from others were parasites, and began to believe that one could only own what one earned. In 1945, the United States detonated 2 nuclear weapons over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Ryan saw this as the ultimate corruption of his ideals, science and determination harnessed for destruction, creating a weapon that gave the parasites the ability to destroy anything that they could not seize. He decided to use his entire fortune to build a community where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, and where the great would not be constrained by the small, in the only place he felt that the parasites could not touch, the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. He called this place Rapture. To create his vision, he hired Irish brothers and architects, Simon and Daniel Wales, to design the city. Ryan and his associates secured manufacturing materials in secret to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Using his own private steamliner, the Olympian, he transported building supplies to the coordinates where the city would be built, located between Greenland and Iceland. Deep-sea welders and mechanics create a foundation for the city by sinking pilings and girders deep into the rock and silt. Prefabricated buildings with frames of aluminium were assembled near the surface, submerged and then lowered. Upon hearing upon a wealthy building project, Frank Gorland, a resourceful criminal, looked to con some money. Discovering that a smuggler named Frank Fontaine, owner of Fontaine Fisheries, was supplying the workers with fish, he met with the owner and killed him, taking his identity of Frank Fontaine and running his business. Upon learning more information about Rapture, he wrote letters to Andrew Ryan, claiming to admire his ideals, and asked to set up his fishing business in Rapture. By November the 5th, 1946, Rapture had begun receiving its first residents as the infrastructure had built up enough to be habitable for a large population, bringing in the best and brightest that Andrew could find. As people came in, the city continued to grow. 2 years later, Ryan accepts Fontaine's request to come to the city. Fontaine sets up a fishing dock in Port Neptune, which becomes his front for a smuggling operation. While walking through the fishing dock, Bridget Tenenbaum, a geneticist, observed the results of a sea slug's venom upon an injured hand of a worker at the dock. She discovered that the sea slug produced a substance that could heal damaged cells and resurrect them. Bridget called this substance Adam. She went to Fontaine with a proposal that he could fund research on the slugs, and he quickly saw the business opportunities of the endeavour. Finding that Adam had the ability to manipulate DNA and effectively give people superpowers, Fontaine set up an Adam business, Fontaine Futuristics, employing Tenenbaum and another geneticist, Dr. Souchong, to research and develop plasmids and gene tonics, domestic aids that could give a person the ability to start a fire instantly and pick up objects from a distance. They soon discovered that the sea slugs did not naturally produce a large enough Adam quantity for serious research and commercial exploitation. Dr. Tenenbaum develops a procedure whereby a sea slug is implanted into a human host stomach, finding that a symbiotic interaction between host and slug yielded up to 30 times the quantity of usable Adam. Female children were found to be the only viable host, and so, Tenenbaum informed Fontaine that they required little girls to mass produce Adam. Further research of Adam showed that it had a rather serious downside of causing gradual cosmetic changes and mental deterioration for those who use it habitually. A random quality of recycled Adam was that it sometimes gave the user the ability to see memories of the previous user. To maintain the city, Dr. Souchong created genetically enhanced human beings who had had their skins and organs grafted into an enormous diving suit to serve as Rapture's maintenance workers, to help in later construction projects and to do the menial work of Rapture that was not profitable. Rosie's riveted panels and windows, while bouncers drilled deep-sea rocks for expansion of the city. In 1949, a tear opens and the last Zachary Hill Comstock across all realities steps through. On his hand, the tattooed initials AD. In his reality, Anna's head, rather than her pinky finger, was severed by the closing Lutece tear, killing her. Overwhelmed by horror and guilt, the Lutece sent him through time and space to start over and forget his guilt. Stepping through the tear had also altered his memories, and so he reverted back to his original name, Booker Dewitt, and became a private detective in Rapture. In 1950, Fontaine creates the Little Sister Orphanage, a charity where parents could willingly give up their children, although Fontaine used this as a front to use little girls to generate Adam. Ryan later invited Dr. Sophia Lamb, a psychologist, to Rapture to help citizens cope with underwater life. However, Lamb started to use the therapy sessions as a means to brainwash her patients into joining a cult, the core belief being that every citizen of Rapture owes each other a sense of unity and brotherhood, a stark contrast to Andrew Ryan's philosophy. The people of the cult strive to be released from the self, and be reborn as a selfless being in service of the family. After 6 years of construction, the city of Rapture is completed in 1951. Andrew Ryan then cuts off contact with the surface world. After the birth of Sophia's daughter, Eleanor, she made certain that Eleanor would be the perfect vessel to continue furthering her goals. She attempted to keep her daughter isolated from other children, and privately tutored her, hoping to raise a genius-level intellect. With their work now complete, the Wales brothers moved to Siren Alley. Due to Rapture being under the ocean, some areas started leaking. Convinced that he had not done his job correctly, filled with guilt, Simon began receiving counselling from Sophia Lamb. Here, he became exposed to her philosophy of altruism and adopted the name Father Wales, preaching Lamb's collectivist ideals. With Rapture booming with intellectual minds, Bridget Tenenbaum, Sander Cohen, Gilbert Alexander, Andrew Ryan, Sophia Lamb, and Dr. Souchong were placed on a poster as Rapture's best and brightest. These great minds would shape the future of Rapture. With all of the new technology that Rapture had to offer, Charles Milton Porter and his associate, Reed Wall, created Rapture Central Computing, a company in charge of the regulation and safety of Rapture's automated systems. At the centre of this, the Thinker, an artificial intelligence that could perform all of the calculation needs of the city. Soon, the Adam culture had taken a hold of Rapture. Tennis events became sponsored by the telekinesis plasmid. Dentist offices advertised a free plasmid sample with a root canal. Products like Fresh Hair, Sports Boost and Instant Piano Prodigy offered citizens an easy way to a full head of hair, physical fitness or musical genius. The extremely addictive nature of Adam soon led to it becoming vital for Rapture's continued function. Everybody wanted it. Everybody needed it. As an increasing number of negative side effects resulting from Adam's usage became clear, Ryan refused to interfere, as his philosophy put responsibility on the individual and not a government. To do so, he believed, would be a betrayal of his free market ideology, and the individual's freedom Rapture was founded upon, believing that the great chain of society would correct the issue. As the addiction began to worsen, the demand for Adam skyrocketed far beyond what Rapture could produce, and soon withdrawal symptoms began driving Adam users insane, turning them into rabidly Adam-addicted splicers, driving them to start attacking and killing anyone nearby in hopes of acquiring more of the substance. With the Thinker in full use, and now able to think for itself, Charles Milton Porter begins to input data about his deceased wife Pearl, who had died years before, in a way to help with his grieving. While conducting an investigation of missing ships and submarines, a diver accidentally discovers Rapture and is welcomed into the city, becoming known as Johnny Topside. Eventually, Ryan finally understood the threat to his city that Fontaine posed, marking him as someone to be watched. He realised that he had missed the boat on the Adam market and began to investigate Fontaine's businesses, using his security team to expose his criminal activities and his crew of smugglers, as he believed that the greatest threat to the city was the city's existence being exposed to the surface, as the smuggling ring brought in items from the surface, creating risk. Standard persuasion proved fruitless, as Fontaine often coerced and even murdered any witnesses who considered revealing his crimes. Ryan's men eventually turned to torture to gain the information Ryan needed to prove that Fontaine was a traitor to Rapture. He then ordered that those convicted of smuggling would be subject to capital punishment, increasingly relying upon force to ensure his control of Rapture. Aware of how Charles had been using the Thinker, Reed Wall accused him of misusing and wasting the technology, which he believed had the potential to tell the future through equations and algorithms. Now wanting the Thinker to himself, Wall used the Thinker to forge Charles's voice, pledging loyalty to Fontaine. With this evidence, Ryan has Porter incarcerated in Persephone, a secret facility created by Augustus Sinclair, and puts Wall in charge of the Thinker. Ryan did not trust Johnny Topside's story of his accidental discovery of Rapture, and was convinced that he must be a government agent sent to spy on Rapture. Ryan quickly had him incarcerated at the Persephone penal colony. Thus, he effectively disappeared from the public eye, and was put in with other exiled citizens who had worked against Ryan's philosophy or posed a threat to Rapture. In 1956, Ryan's mistress, Jasmine Jolene, became pregnant and feared telling him. Using Bridget Tenenbaum as an intermediary, Fontaine offered to pay Jolene a large sum of money in exchange for the fetus of her unborn child. Jasmine accepted the offer, seeing it as her only chance to gain financial independence. As Ryan carried out his war on smuggling, Fontaine fought Ryan on a different front with what he called the charity angle. He created Fontaine's home for the poor, for those who had fallen on hard times. People in these poorhouses were then used to test combat-based plasmids that Fontaine Futuristics was starting to develop. Ryan noticed Lamb's growing influence with the citizens of Rapture and began to regret bringing her in. Her ideology of altruism largely clashed with his own, and Ryan saw her as a corrupting influence in his paradise. He agreed to a series of public debates, hoping to diffuse Sophia's support by showing the flaws in her reasoning. These debates did not have the effect that Ryan hoped. Inside the Fontaine Futuristics, the unborn child of Jasmine Jolene is artificially grown by a team including Dr. Suchong and Bridget Tenenbaum. By the age of 1, Jack weighed 58 pounds and had the gross musculature of a fit 19-year-old. Suchong monitored Jack's rapid development and implanted him with 2 known mind control triggers: Would You Kindly, which caused Jack to obey unquestionably, and Code Yellow, which, when activated, would ultimately stop Jack's heart. Peach Wilkins, one of Fontaine's smugglers, agreed to cut a deal and flip Fontaine due to Ryan's war on the smuggling ring. Now, Ryan and his security team had valid grounds to arrest Fontaine. Upon finding this out, Fontaine decided that he was going to make one last stand and go down guns blazing, rather than allow himself to be arrested. In preparation for the conflict soon to come, Fontaine handed out combat plasmids to his followers and employees. Eventually, Lamb's ideologies became so much of a threat to Ryan that he resorted to less ethical means to have her brought down. He used Augustus Sinclair's company, Sinclair Solutions, to spy in Sophia Lamb's inner circle by paying Stanley Poole to infiltrate the family. While in the family, Stanley was under intense pressure from Ryan's operatives, and from young Eleanor Lamb, who became suspicious of him. Stanley anonymously reported Sophia Lamb's plots to take control of Rapture, resulting in her detention at Persephone along with her followers. Now ready, Fontaine has Jack, a fully grown man, smuggled out of Rapture in a bathysphere and sent to the surface as a sleeper agent, living out his pre-programmed life as Jack Wynard until needed. His secret weapon, his ace in the hole. After Lamb's disappearance, Stanley Poole used his new privileges to throw wild parties at Lamb's expense. When Eleanor threatened Stanley with telling her mother what he was doing, Stanley kidnapped and sold her to a Little Sisters orphanage. On September 12, 1958, Ryan ordered for Fontaine's arrest at Fontaine Fisheries. Fontaine resisted, resulting in a major firefight, in which Fontaine faked his own death. Over the next 2 months, the supporters of Fontaine who survived the shootout and those who had held allegiance to him were tracked down and arrested. Dr. Suchong was given a choice by Ryan to either be locked up with them or to earn a large salary by working for him permanently. Naturally, Suchong chose the latter option, while Bridget Tenenbaum went into hiding. With Fontaine presumed dead, he created and became the persona of a revolutionary named Atlas, protesting and rallying supporters against Ryan's philosophy in his running of Rapture. Although Ryan had built Rapture to escape the big government that could take over private industry, Ryan was forced to engage in precisely the same behaviour, taking over Fontaine Futuristics. This move shocked Rapture to its core. Atlas protested against him in front of citizens, building support against Ryan. Atlas's followers gathered weapons, ammunition and plasmids to arm themselves, ready for a war. This did not go unnoticed by Ryan, who had Atlas and some of his close followers sent to Fontaine's department store, which had been converted into a makeshift prison. This prison also provided Ryan with a place to lock up splicers who had become too insane to be allowed in public, under the guise that they were working for Fontaine. With Fontaine's Little Sister orphanages closed, an orphan called Sally was left wandering in the streets of Rapture, and later adopted by Booker Dewitt. In an attempt to at least partially mitigate the Adam problem, Dr. Suchong psychologically adapted the Little Sisters to extract residual Adam from the dead bodies from splicer attacks around Rapture, which could then be recycled back into usable plasmids for sale. The extraction of Adam, however, made the Little Sisters targets for the splicers, and as such, the Protector program was initiated. Dr. Gilbert Alexander started to engineer a bond between Protectors and the Little Sisters. The Protectors endured strenuous genetic and psychological conditioning, losing much of their free will. The subjects for this program being exiled criminals, the criminally insane, and political dissidents imprisoned in Persephone. The aim of the bond to mimic the emotional bond between the father and his daughter. He called this the pair bond. The theory that Protectors, also commonly called Big Daddies, would guard their little sister and not wander away from the girls, otherwise they would slip into a coma. Sander Cohen, an artist and friend of Ryan, began trafficking young girls to various individuals willing to pay the right price. The majority were bought by Ryan Industries to be turned into little sisters. After many unsuccessful attempts, the first candidate from the Protector program to be successfully pair bonded is Subject Delta, previously known as Johnny Topside. His little sister, Eleanor Lamb, who had fallen into the hands of Dr. Gilbert Alexander, unaware of who her mother was when she was turned into the little sister. As Sinclair rented out inmates at Persephone to Ryan Industries, Charles Milton Porter became the 18th Alpha Series Big Daddy, Subject Sigma, in the Protector program. In a short time, the Alpha Series failed to be practical, as the Protectors only protected a specific little sister. If their little sister were lost to splicers or rescued by Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum, it rendered the Protectors useless, sending them into a coma or making them suicidally aggressive. Even after being reprogrammed, they were only usable as mere foot soldiers. With the unsuccessful results, Dr. Gilbert gave up while Suchong continued to look for a solution. The unbonded Alpha Series were then deactivated and put into cold storage, never bonded to a little sister, one of them being Subject Sigma. Living in Rapture, Booker Dewitt had become an alcoholic and gambler. One day, while at the tables, his adopted daughter, Sally, is kidnapped and later turned into a little sister. After searching for her, he is later told that her body had been found. Believing the lie, he gave up on his search. In Fontaine's department store, a tear opens and Elizabeth steps out, her aim to search for the last remaining Comstock in all realities, intent on punishing and killing him for the beheading of the alternate baby Anna. Due to her arrival, the owners reported the tear and control of the restaurant was handed over to Dr. Suchong. Discovering the tears, Suchong discovers that Jeremiah Fink, from another universe, has been using tears to steal Rapture's technological advancements and has been passing them off as his own in his own reality. Soon, he discovers that Fink is also working on a similar pairing bond, and so, they begin sharing research in an attempt to create it. After Elizabeth's accidental bonding with Songbird, Fink puts an end to their working relationship, making Suchong bitter with the aim to steal a DNA sample from the girl that had been imprinted. After the department store has been prepared with security devices and full of undesirables, Ryan has it separated from the city and sunk to the bottom of an ocean trench, putting a hold on Suchong's research on the pairing bond. With the apparent death of Fontaine and Ryan's actions afterwards, Rapture's population began to question exactly how much power Andrew Ryan should have. Adding to the tension was the increasing number of unexplained disappearances of young girls in the city. The end of such a turbulent year may have caused some who sensed the deteriorating state of civil society to breathe a sigh of relief. But peace would be short-lived for the people of Rapture, and soon, a much larger scale conflict would come. In the underwater city of Rapture, the citizens believed that after such a terrible year, the issues that had plagued the city had been resolved, but more trouble was just around the corner. In Persephone, Sinclair had put Sophia Lamb to work as a therapist for the other inmates, hoping to make them docile, although she had actually converted them to her cause, eventually leading an uprising within the prison, taking control from Sinclair and gaining her freedom. With Sally falling into the hands of Sander Cohen, he sends her to the sunken department store. Fearing that members of the Rapture family would tell Sophia Lamb of his conduct since her imprisonment, Stanley Poole exploits a dangerous flaw in the Dionysus Park construction, flooding the park and killing all witnesses to his misdeeds. Having had time to research and discover where DeWitt was, Elizabeth puts her plan in motion to take her revenge. On New Year's Eve 1958, Elizabeth enters Booker's office. Unaware of who she is, Elizabeth convinces him that Sally is still alive. Together, they track down Sander Cohen, where he reveals he knows where Sally is, but in exchange, Booker and Elizabeth have to dance to inspire him on his painting. Booker and Elizabeth begin a slow, uncomfortable waltz, but the dance is cut short when Cohen finds an error in them and has them electrocuted into unconsciousness. Booker and Elizabeth awaken, both inside Cohen's bathysphere. He informs them through radio that Sally is somewhere in the sunken department store. Fighting through splices, they make their way using a tram to the department store. They find Sally being chased off into a ventilation system. By turning on the heat in the system, Sally is forced out. To his horror, Booker sees that she has been turned into a little sister. Sally calls out for her Big Daddy. After seemingly killing the Protector, Booker once again tries to pull the girl from the vent. Suddenly, he relives his forgotten memories and remembers his past as Zachary Hill Comstock and his attempts to take Anna, which ended up accidentally decapitating her in the process. Elizabeth expresses anger and resentment at Comstock, and she and the Lutesses reveal that he had the twins send him to Rapture to forget his past, reverting him back to Booker Dewitt to start a new life there. A horrified, penitent Comstock apologizes to Elizabeth for what he had done, but she doesn't accept this. He is suddenly impaled from behind through the chest by the still living Protector's drill, killing Comstock and fulfilling Elizabeth's vengeance. The Big Daddy then turns on Elizabeth and throws her through a wall, impaling her on a piece of rebar, killing her. Elizabeth finds herself in an illusion of what she perceives Paris to be. With remorse of using Sally to kill Booker, she plans to return to Rapture. The Lutesses explain that she remained in existence because of her quantum superposition, and that she could not return to Rapture without collapsing her unique quantum state. Returning would remove her abilities as a result of returning to a dimension where she had died. By returning, all that she would have left is her knowledge from her books and her memories from what she saw behind the doors. Despite warnings from the Lutesses, she demands to be brought back to Rapture to save Sally. Experiencing amnesia from being placed back in Rapture, Elizabeth wakes up to find Atlas and his thugs scavenging Comstock's corpse and capturing Sally. Her subconscious creates a vision of Booker Dewitt that acts as her scrambled memories from previously being omnipotent. Being fed information by her subconscious, she claims to be Suchong's lab assistant and tells Atlas that she can help him escape the sunken department store and return to Rapture in exchange for Sally's freedom, in which he agrees. Leaving Atlas, she comes across her own corpse and understands the situation that she is in. With broken information from her subconscious, she makes her way to Suchong's lab in the Silver Fin restaurant and finds a Lutece device that has been built there. After fixing the device, she enters a tear into the Finkton district of Columbia, where Suchong has been watching Fink's research. She obtains a Lutece particle, which she hopes to use to lift the department store back up to the rest of Rapture. To get back to Rapture, Suchong demands that Elizabeth retrieve a hair sample from Jeremiah Fink's hidden laboratory, a piece of hair that had once belonged to Elizabeth as a child during her bonding experiments. Retrieving the hair sample, Elizabeth comes back into Rapture and sends the hair sample to Suchong, where he uses it to continue research on pair bonding for the Big Daddies. With Ryan sending down men to kill Atlas's goons, Elizabeth navigates them to Fontaine's office and places the Lutece particle on the roof, floating the building back to Rapture, bringing with it Atlas and his men. Atlas subsequently betrays Elizabeth and has her knocked out with chloroform. That night, in a televised broadcast, Ryan acknowledges the trials in the previous year, but offers a toast to the city that 1959 might be Rapture's finest year. Just moments after his broadcast, a group of Atlas's organised terrorists launched an attack on Rapture's elite at the Kashmir restaurant. Finally leaving Persephone, Sophia Lamb orchestrates the abduction of her daughter so that Subject Delta will come to save her. She then uses a hypnotised Big Daddy plasmid and forces him to shoot himself. With Subject Delta dead, Lamb retreats back to Persephone with her daughter. The attack on the Kashmir restaurant resembled a powder keg, igniting all the class conflict and frustration that existed just below the surface of Ryan's betrayal of his ideals with the nationalisation of Fontaine Futuristics. This created the useful recruiting tool for Fontaine's new persona, Atlas. Soon posters asking "Who is Atlas?" sprouted up all over Rapture. With unrest, terrified citizens pulled all of their money out of the banks, causing an economic collapse. Many of the people who resided in Fontaine's poorhouses became the first recruits to an army aimed at overthrowing Ryan and seizing Rapture. The Civil War brought a huge increase in Adam usage. Combat plasmids like Incinerate and Electrobolt saw a huge jump in sales, and with it, a significant increase in the unpleasant side effects of excessive splicing. As citizens spliced themselves for their own self-defense, the city as a whole started to become increasingly mentally unstable and further addicted to Adam. Dr. Suchong suggested an unconventional means of breaking the stalemate that currently divided the city. He proposed altering the structure of the available plasmids to make the users susceptible to mental suggestion by pheromones. This represented the ultimate betrayal of Ryan's philosophy, to deny citizens even the ability of free will itself. Ryan agreed, and it worked, turning the Civil War's fate in Ryan's favour. After coming in and out of consciousness for 2 weeks, Elizabeth reawakens to a war-torn Rapture. Atlas once again promises that he'll let Sally and herself go if she can find his ace in the hole. Using her scrambled memories, she enters Suchong's secret lab, finding a wounded bouncer-type Big Daddy near 2 little sisters blocking the way. Elizabeth attempts to get him out the way, looking through Suchong's notes as he is still struggling with pair bonding the Big Daddies to the little sisters, revealing that the Big Daddies need the Adam of the little sisters to survive. When telling the little sisters that the Big Daddy needs their genetic material to heal, one of the girls extracts Adam from the other and injects it into the Big Daddy, healing him, thus successfully pair bonding him with the little sisters. Elizabeth later comes across Suchong with the little sister. Frustrated with his research not working and the little sister's need for attention, he slaps one of the girls, unaware that she has been successfully pair bonded with the Big Daddy, resulting in the Big Daddy killing him. Elizabeth retrieves the ace in the hole from Suchong's body, revealed to be an encoded message of chemical compounds. This breakthrough leads to the bonding of Bouncer and Rosie Big Daddies to little sisters. With the bonding system now working, the pairs are deployed into the public space of Rapture. Elizabeth returns to Atlas and hands him the ace in the hole, in which he bludgeons Elizabeth with a wrench. Angrily, he asks Elizabeth to reveal what the chemical compounds mean, in which she replies, "Would you kindly," after having a vision. Upon hearing this, he gives Elizabeth one final blow and leaves to continue his plans of taking control of Rapture by bringing back his sleeper agent. As Elizabeth dies, Sally holds her hand. Elizabeth has a vision of the events to come, and knows that she has died for a reason. Over the following year, more residents splice. The people who survive and keep their sanity stay barricaded in small holdouts within the city, while Sophia Lamb continues to build up more followers, who escape the bloodshed in Persephone. Ryan fast-tracks the Vita Chambers project, a device that would resurrect him or anyone close to his genetic makeup if they died traumatically, covering himself if he is attacked. He then puts all the bathyspheres into a genetic lockdown so that no one but him can leave the city or travel between buildings. While many die on both sides for the fight for control, sections of Rapture are closed. With multiple attacks, bombings, and insane Adam-addicted splices, Rapture becomes an incredibly dangerous place to be, trapped under the ocean, with nowhere to go. Now, in 1960, upon Fontaine's summons, using the trigger phrase "Would you kindly," Jack boards a plane and hijacks it, forcing it to crash land at the coordinates of a lighthouse, the main entrance to Rapture. Entering the lighthouse, Jack enters a bathysphere and is taken into the unrecognisable city of Rapture. As he shares a similar genetic makeup as his father, Andrew Ryan, bathyspheres and Vita Chambers work for him. Upon witnessing a brutal splicer attack, Atlas contacts Jack through a shortwave radio. He promises to help him find a functioning bathysphere in exchange for Jack helping him find Atlas's fictional wife and son who are trapped in Neptune's bounty. Ryan notices that there is someone new in Rapture. Convinced that Jack is a Russian agent or part of the CIA, he sends splicers and security devices to Jack, believing that he could make an already disintegrating situation even worse. On his way, Jack encounters the once brilliant minds of Rapture turn mad through Adam withdrawal. He bumps into one of the few sane members of the previous Rapture's best and brightest, Bridget Tenenbaum, who implores him not to hurt the little sisters, as she is dedicated to saving and curing them. Arriving at Neptune's bounty, Ryan's splicers destroy the sub, apparently killing Atlas's wife and son. Jack escapes and is told by an angry Atlas that Ryan must be stopped. On his journey, Jack finds the body of Jasmine Jolene, who has been murdered by Ryan after discovering her involvement with Fontaine. He later meets the deranged Sander Cohen. Arriving at Hephaestus, the power facility of Rapture and the home of Andrew Ryan, Atlas asks Jack, "Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch? It's time to finish this." Jack discovers that Ryan has set the entire complex to self-destruct. When reaching Ryan's office, he sees a Would You Kindly board on display for him. Here, he meets Ryan. Now aware that Jack is actually his son, he educates him about his true self, telling him of his birth, his conditioning, his experiences in Rapture, and the phrase "Would you kindly," which has been controlling his actions. He explains the fundamentals between a man and a slave, that a man chooses, a slave obeys. He then hands Jack a golf club and orders Jack to kill him. Jack obeys, beating his father to death, revealing how powerless Jack really is. With the office Vita chamber deactivated, Ryan dies and is unable to be resurrected. With Ryan eliminated, Jack takes the genetic key to Rapture systems from his corpse and shuts down the self-destruct mechanism, unknowingly handing Rapture over to Atlas. Atlas now reveals his true identity as Frank Fontaine and thanks Jack for handing the keys to Rapture to him, later attempting to kill Jack using the city's security devices. Jack escapes with the help of Tenenbaum's little sisters by entering a vent, which collapses, knocking him unconscious. Jack wakes up in Tenenbaum's sanctuary, where she informs him that while he slept, she removed most of the mental conditioning and is no longer vulnerable to the Would You Kindly command, although he is still vulnerable to the Code Yellow command, which causes Jack's heart to begin the process of shutting down. With the help of Tenenbaum, Jack finds and uses the cure for the conditioning, Lot 192, which was developed by Dr. Suchong, and becomes completely free from Fontaine's mind control. Now free and in control of himself, Jack plans to take Fontaine down. In order to pursue Fontaine, Jack is forced to partially become a Big Daddy to trick a little sister into thinking that he is one of their protectors, so that she can lead him to Fontaine. The only physical change that he undertakes is the automated vocal cord surgery. Afterward, Jack confronts a now heavily spliced Fontaine in a final battle. Fontaine knocks Jack to the ground. As Fontaine is about to attack Jack, a group of little sisters pounce on Fontaine with the hypodermic syringes they used to extract Adam, now extracting all of the Adam out of Fontaine, killing him. Now free of Fontaine, Jack escapes to the surface using a bathysphere with the little sisters, one of them being Sally, and raises them as his daughters. Tenenbaum leaves Rapture, and Elizabeth's sacrifice seems worth it. After the death of both Andrew Ryan and Frank Fontaine, Sophia Lamb could truly move through Rapture without fear. She learned about Fontaine's program of genetic tampering that had created Jack's conditioning and was inspired by it. She saw Jack's actions under the influence of the Would You Kindly as an example of perfect altruism, acting to uphold the common good without any introspection or free will. Thus, Lamb began her attempts to create an intellect that would be completely selfless and good. Later meeting Gilbert Alexander, she converted him to her altruistic beliefs. Her plan required giving a subject massive doses of Adam, collected from the alive and deceased Rapture citizens, which contain their memories and genius. Sophia worked with Dr. Alexander over several years to rehabilitate Eleanor. Eventually, they were able to undo her little sister's mental conditioning, but they could not remove the sea slug that had been implanted within her. As the little sisters grew older in Rapture, the psychological and mental conditioning forced upon them had a terrifying aftermath on their bodies. Although they could no longer produce Adam themselves, their exposure to the substance made them grow taller than most normal girls their age and granted them incredible strength. The mental conditioning given to them by Dr. Suchong, which once tricked them into seeing Rapture as a beautiful utopia, slowly drove them insane and made them highly aggressive. The girls also had traces of plasmids found in the Adam they had recycled. This began to show in the girls' genes, allowing them to use these dangerous powers against anyone who crossed them. As more and more of the little sisters began to turn into these feral beasts, Dr. Alexander decided to use new mental conditioning methods and advanced diving suits to convert the girls into a new form of protector, the Big Sister. Due to his guilt of turning Sophia's daughter Eleanor into a little sister, he volunteered as Sophia's first subject. Unfortunately, the experiment began to go wrong as the Adam distorted Gilbert's genetic structure, eventually driving him mad and severely mutating him. Lamb realised that the only person that could contain all of the Adam of Rapture was one who had previously been a little sister. She decided that her daughter would be the next subject as the sea slug inside her protected her from the genetic damage that would be caused by using Adam. Therefore, Dr. Lamb began injecting Eleanor with massive doses of Adam and glorifying her as a holy vessel for her followers in the Rapture family. Eleanor was confined to Persephone and the Fontaine Futuristics building. Horrified at seeing the changes Dr. Alexander had went through as the experiment began to fail, she became more rebellious, seeing the hypocrisy in her mother's altruistic beliefs and wanted to escape. To further her plans, Sophia needed a large supply of Adam. She had control over most of Rapture's populace through the influence of the Rapture family, but the Little Sisters who could supply Adam were becoming too old. Thus, in 1967, Big Sisters were sent up to the surface to abduct little girls to be converted into new Little Sisters so that Sophia could restart the Gatherer program. One of these girls being Cindy, whose father, Mark Meltzer, followed various clues and sightings of the Big Sisters until eventually discovering Rapture. Noticing the influx of missing girls on the surface, Bridget Tenenbaum became suspicious and returned to Rapture to save them. Arriving in Rapture, Tenenbaum finds that she was correct in her suspicions and teams up with Augustus Sinclair. As a result of her mother's experiments and plans for her, Eleanor starts to think of an escape. Eleanor had formed a bond with the new Little Sisters kidnapped from the surface, and could control their actions outside of Persephone. Using them, she is able to carry out her plans around the city, even though her mother had her trapped in confinement. Part of Eleanor's rebellion against her mother was remembering her time with her bonded Big Daddy, Subject Delta, who was murdered in front of her. Through her influence over Little Sisters, Eleanor manages to find Delta's body and extract a gene sample. She uses this sample to calibrate the Vita chambers to his genetic frequency. She also contacts Bridget Tenenbaum, requesting her aid in undoing the psychological conditioning that had been imprinted in Delta's mind when he was a Big Daddy. Roughly 10 years after Delta's death, in 1968, Eleanor's plan succeeds in bringing her Big Daddy back. Delta is revived at a Vita chamber and begins to retrieve telepathic messages from Eleanor, pleading for help. Delta encounters Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum, who tells him that in order to save Eleanor and stop Lamb, he must travel across the ruins of Rapture to Fontaine Futuristics. If he does not, his bond will stop his heartbeat if he strays too far from his little sister, preventing him from escaping Rapture and eventually killing him. On his journey, Delta is aided by Tenenbaum's new ally, Augustus Sinclair. Delta discovers that Lamb plans to use Adam to transform her daughter into a superhuman being with all the knowledge of Rapture's intellectual elite. Lamb will then use the same conditioning methods used on Jack to destroy Eleanor's sense of self, brainwashing her into acting only for her goals. He also discovers Sinclair's agenda: take control of Rapture from Lamb, cannibalize its technology, and sell it to the surface world using his lifeboat in Persephone. With Delta on his way, Bridget Tenenbaum reactivates Subject Sigma, formerly Charles Milton Porter, from cold storage and tasks him with retrieving the Thinker's codes and blueprints, believing that these codes could be used to recreate the Thinker on the surface and create a cure for splicing and the Adam sickness. Although not speaking to him herself, she utilizes the Thinker to speak to him as Charles, creating a way for Sigma to learn about his past life on his journey without being aware of it. On his way through Rapture, Delta is stopped at Pauper's Drop, a region controlled by Grace Holloway, a loyal member of the Rapture family. Many years before, she had been instructed by Sophia Lamb to watch over Eleanor during her incarceration in Persephone, but on a trip to Dionysus Park, Eleanor was kidnapped. Later seeing Eleanor as a little sister, Grace had attempted to pick her up, but Delta responded by breaking her jaw, this forming a hatred for all Big Daddies. With Sophia now in control of Rapture, and with Grace's hatred for Delta, she does her best to halt his journey and keep him from Eleanor. Her belief that Big Daddies only cause pain wherever they go. Making his way through Pauper's Drop, Delta encounters Grace and acquires a key required to reactivate the lockdown train system. Now face to face with Grace, he's given the option to kill her and prove her beliefs correct on Big Daddies, or spare her and change her mind. On his way to Eleanor, Sophia does what she can to halt Delta's journey. He comes across Father Simon Wales, a blindly zealous splicer who believes that Eleanor is the key to paradise. Wales fires a torpedo at Delta's train car, which he is using to travel through Rapture. The torpedo badly damages the train car, which results in Delta having to look for another one. Delta goes through Siren Alley, where Wales has set up a temple for the Rapture family. After killing Father Simon Wales, he drains the water from Dionysus Park using Siren Alley's pumps, aware that the park had a train car that he could use to access Fontaine Futuristics. Delta enters Dionysus Park, but finds that the train cars are locked down, courtesy of Stanley Poole, fearful of people now coming to the drained park and discovering his misdeeds. After helping Poole stop Little Sisters from collecting the leftover Adam in the area, which contains memories of his actions against Sophia, Delta is made aware that Poole was partially responsible for him being put in prison, in turn resulting in him becoming a Big Daddy. He is then given the choice of either killing or sparing the man by Sophia. After a while of searching Rapture, Mark finally discovers his daughter in Dionysus Park, but is upset to see that she does not recognize him. A big sister then attacks him and takes both him and his daughter to Fontaine Futuristics to Sophia. Here, Sophia gives Mark the option to be executed for trespassing in her city, or be turned into a Big Daddy and bonded to his daughter. Although bonded and mentally conditioned, he believed that to be better than dying and being away from her. After finally making it to Fontaine Futuristics, Delta now meets Gilbert Alexander, who is now deeply insane due to absorbing a massive amount of Adam. Delta retrieves a gene sample and before leaving is once again given the choice of ending or sparing Gilbert's life, the man responsible for turning him into a Big Daddy. Using the gene sample, Delta finally makes it to Persephone, where Eleanor is being held. As he enters, he finds Eleanor locked within a quarantine chamber with Sophia. Before Delta can enter the chamber, Sophia smothers the sleeping Eleanor with a pillow. This stops her heart long enough for Delta's body to shut down, due to his bond with the girl, resulting in him being knocked unconscious. Delta is captured by Lamb, and his pair bond with Eleanor is severed, weakening his heart in the process. With Delta imprisoned, Lamb's followers find and capture Augustus Sinclair, where they quickly convert him into an Alpha Series Big Daddy under her control. Using the Little Sisters, Eleanor sends a special plasmid to Delta that will allow him to take control of a Little Sister. Following Eleanor's instructions, as a Little Sister, Delta brings her parts of the Big Sister armor, turning her into one. This allows Eleanor to free Delta and fight by his side. They decide to make their escape from Rapture using Sinclair's escape pod. Attempting to force Delta to surrender, Sophia directs her followers to set explosive charges throughout Persephone. She also sends Sinclair against his will to distract Delta and keep him from advancing. During their escape, Delta is forced to kill Sinclair. Eleanor and Delta make it to the escape pod where Sophia waits inside, but an explosive final trap outside the pod by Sophia mostly wounds Delta. As Persephone collapses, the pod starts to rise to the surface and water pours in from the explosion. Eleanor makes the choice to save her mother from drowning, choosing to forgive her. Arriving at the surface, Eleanor uses her Big Sister needle to absorb Delta's Adam and conscience so that they can be together forever, with Delta guiding Eleanor's actions and drives. After many of Reedwall's attempts to stop Subject Sigma from entering Minerva's den, Reed is killed and Sigma retrieves the blueprints and codes for the Thinker. Here, Sigma discovers his own identity of Charles Milton Porter, and that it was actually the Thinker that had been emulating his voice this whole time, guiding him through Minerva's den. Shortly after, Tenenbaum returns to the surface with Sigma and reverts him back to a normal functioning human with help from the Thinker. And now, she planned to use it to synthesize a cure for splicing. It is unknown what became of the city of Rapture. Without maintenance workers to fix the repairs, it is likely that by the beginning of the 21st century, Rapture will have crumbled into a barren, uninhabitable ruin. With no life remaining in the city, all buildings will likely have collapsed, with all interior areas having been flooded and destroyed. There's always a lighthouse, there's always a man, there's always a city. How these turn out are simply down to constants and variables.
That was the fall and rise of Rapture and Columbia. Now some of you may notice that this may be a re-upload, and I guess it is. I have combined the 3 separate videos into one big one. Over the last few months, I have had messages from people asking when I was posting part 2 and part 3, which were actually posted a while back. It seems that YouTube didn't push them to the subscribers, which is a shame, and so I've done this, the whole story packed into one video. If you liked it, then go ahead and subscribe, I would really appreciate it, and I will make more timeline videos soon. Interacting in any way will help the video, so like it, dislike it, share it, comment, just do anything to it, I'd really appreciate it. If you would like to stay up to date with what I do outside of YouTube and are maybe interested in some behind the scenes content, then go and follow my Twitter and Instagram. Finally, I would like to thank my patrons who are helping to support the channel. I really appreciate you. Thank you to The Old Gods, Talus, Detroit, Avi WV, Brunette Janas, Jojo Scotia, Imaginary Holly, Ruben Mendoza and Puppa. I would also like to give an extra special thank you to the Elder Ones tier, Jonas, Lewis and Queen Abby. Thank you guys so much. What did you think of this timeline? Which is your favourite city? And do you think that the new Bioshock will touch on the events in this already established storyline? Let me know below. That was everything I wanted to add really. Now, enjoy your day. Bye.